Welcome, welcome, everyone. Happy Tuesday. We'll get started in just a moment. In the meantime, all right, I know people are still coming into the room, but we're going to go ahead and get started. With that, good morning or good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Consumer Research's AI Moment, how to use conversational AI to discover and quantify consumer drivers. We encourage you to stay active in the chat and enjoy ongoing conversation. As always, please remember to be respectful of everyone participating. Feel free to enter questions into that Q&A pod during the presentation. Some questions may require a follow-up from a different team member, but we'll make sure we get back to you if your questions are not answered live. We'll open the floor to questions at the end. A recording of today's webinar will be sent via Zoom tomorrow. Closed caption is available on the Zoom platform. Click CC on your screen to launch. I'd like to welcome today's presenters, Dr. Labe Lippman. He is the Chief Research Officer for Cloud Research. Dr. Lippman is a professor of psychology at Lander College and Chief Research Officer at Cloud Research. He has written dozens of research articles and co-authored 2 textbooks on online research methods, participant recruitment, and data quality. Labe's work has been covered by the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Harvard Business Review, and others. Also joining us today is Dr. Derek Davis. He's Associate Professor of Commerce, Co-Director, Center for Business Analytics, University of Virginia. Derek is an associate professor at UVA whose research explores the psychological drivers of consumer behavior, including pricing, promotion, and the influence of language on judgment. His work has been published in top journals, and he was named Young Scholar by the Marketing Science Institute and received the AMA's Retail and Pricing SIG Emerging Scholar Award. And I'll turn it over to the two of them.
Good morning, everyone, or afternoon. Really excited to be here with you all. This is my first webinar ever, so uh, off with a good start. Just to kind of frame things a little bit with what Labe and I have been working on together, is this idea that, in every research activity that we have or question that we have this core challenge of trying to understand why did consumers choose what they chose or not, or for those of you in practice, why is my product losing to my competitor's product? In order to unravel that question, we have several different methodologies at our disposal. And what we're going to talk to you today about is a new methodology that we think is really exciting. And so, again, with this core challenge, if we're trying to understand what consumers are thinking about when they're making a decision or a judgment, we really can only measure what we think about ahead of time if it's in a survey, for instance, right? So we can develop survey questions or scale items that we ask in a survey. But what if we miss something, right? And likewise, um, we can't also be in a position where we just have 50 different questions and we're asking them to participants and seeing what sticks and what doesn't, right? So, um, and again, on the other hand, we have other methodologies that are available to us, such as open-ended text box responses or qualitative interviews. And each of these methodologies has their benefits and their drawbacks, right? So, back to survey scale item questions. Uh, it scales really well. You can answer, or I mean, you can ask as many people as you want in terms of how many surveys you send out. And of course, it's extremely easy to analyze and easy to track over time. But again, it only captures what you thought about ahead of time and perhaps also what you think matters, right? So you can imagine a situation where you're trying to understand why customers chose the competitor's product over yours. and you're thinking, well, it's got to be a price issue, or maybe it's a quality issue, maybe it's a brand reputation issue. But what if it's something to do with the channel? What if it's something to do with the trade-offs that people are making between uh, different attributes, right? Or if you're just not thinking about it the same way that consumers are thinking about it, that presents a problem where you might miss some really key insights from a survey. And I think even beyond that too, if you were to ask people, like, tell me about your decision process, right? They're going to give you sort of what arises spontaneously, right? What they think they're actually thinking about. Whereas in a survey, you might come across a situation where uh, just because you have a question about price, maybe they weren't actually thinking about price, but now the question has been posed to them in the survey, and then they start thinking about price. And then they start thinking, well, if they're asking about price, maybe the researcher actually thinks this is really important. And so they're going to give you an answer, right? They're going to mark a 5 on the importance of price, even if spontaneously that wasn't the case. They actually weren't considering price. But that scale question itself is biasing their answer. So those are some limitations and benefits around surveys, right? On the other end, a qualitative interview, open-ended text boxes, you can just ask people, please explain to me how you arose at your decision. And with a qualitative interview, you can ask follow-up questions, and so forth, and really get at the why that was driving their decision. Um, but this isn't very scalable, right? We can't interview 1,000 people very easily. Uh, Believe me, the data analysis is very time consuming, right? And you're pulling in sometimes, historically manual coding by humans or using various LLMs to code data could be really expensive. And the time between when you start your research, when you start interviews and you actually get insights is extremely long, right? And so what we want to talk to you today about is a new methodology using Engage. And so Labe and I and two other colleagues have conducted a few studies within the realm of pain of payment, right, which is an academic term for the reason why people are more freely spend with credit cards versus cash, right? So the idea is that cash is more painful or credit cards are less painful in terms of spending, right? Because it just feels less tangible. And there's a long uh, history of this topic in the academic literature. And of course, it's changed over time as well, where other things like Venmo and other, digital solutions for payment have come to the fore. And so, but still, this idea of pain of payment has stayed relatively stable over time. But because it's dynamic due to all the other technologies that are coming into the space, it also raises a question like, is this the only thing that's driving these differences that we see in payment likelihood, or how much people spend based on the medium that they're using, cash versus credit card? And so we thought, yeah, there must be this idea of pain to payment probably still is in play, but what if there are other factors that are in play that are actually driving spending decisions that we haven't thought about? Right. And so, in order to answer this question, we used Engage, this conversational AI chatbot, right, which you can program, and Lab will get into the details there. Um, but here it's scalable, right? You can run uh, hundreds, thousands of interviews in parallel, right? And then you get that a similar depth in terms of, how much text you're eliciting from people during that chatbot interaction. And most importantly, too, you're allowing the ideas, the attributes, the thoughts and feelings that people felt during that decision process uh, to come forward organically, spontaneously, right? You're not forcing them through a scale response to think about um, a particular driver of their decision. So in one study, we had 1,250 participants, and the scenario was basically you're booking a reservation with friends, and it's at one of these restaurants that asks for a down payment or a reservation, right? In order to have a reservation, you have to pay $50, $75 per person to secure that booking. And we wanted to compare these different methodologies directly to one another. So we had three conditions here. So in a control condition, people only responded to traditional survey scales, right? And then in a separate condition, they answered an open-ended text box. Please tell me about your decision of whether or not to book this reservation. Then they answered those same scales. So it's important to have the scales in each condition to establish essentially a ground truth that we can compare all the other methodologies to. And then in the last condition here, we have the engaged chatbot, where we programmed the chatbots for the cash and credit card conditions. And then after the chatbot interaction, participants move to those same scales. And so before we get into the results, I'm going to turn it over to Labe to talk more about the actual engaged chatbot.
Okay, thank you, Derek. Yeah, and then as Derek said, before we look at the results of this study, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Engage and how it works. So Engage is an AI survey platform that conducts natural conversations, and it can conduct those conversations with thousands of people simultaneously, and then we can analyze the data that's collected from all of those participants. And what this allows us to do is to talk to people in a natural conversational way. And we can ask them questions like, so tell me about why you like this product. And then we can follow up with them and we can probe deeper. And by probing and following up, we can get respondents to really provide a much more detailed picture of what they like and what they don't like. And then we can then categorize that and we can then analyze that. And now, I want to actually start by showing you how this technology works in the real world and how it has been used at scale. And I'm going to share a quick 2-minute video. This is from a CBS News piece that shows how Engage was used to understand the US presidential election. And I'm going to share this, even though it's about polling, but I want to share this quick video because political polling actually faces the very same issue that Derek was just talking about, which is that we usually can know who people want to vote for, so we know the what, but we rarely understand what's actually driving people to vote for their preferred candidate. Like, why do they feel the way they do? What reasons do they have for preferring a particular candidate? And so this clip is going to show how we use qualitative interviews to get at this issue. And so let me get that started.
Survey aims to understand voters' opinions and feelings about Kamala Harris.
That's the sound of an AI chatbot from Cloud Research conducting a battleground state poll.
Are there specific issues or policies that you feel are exceptionally important? And how do you see Kamala's stance aligning with or deviating from your views on these issues?
Their online polling service, Engage, can gather open-ended responses, ask follow-up questions, and analyze trends from a huge number of people all at once.
That is really the revolutionary component of this. You can have conversations with representative people and get insights in terms of like what is really going on in the country in a way that you just couldn't do before.
Labe Littman is the company's chief research officer.
With AI, something that could take weeks through traditional type of data analysis can be done in a matter of minutes. AI could take thousands of conversations. It could conduct thematic analyses, pull out insights.
Littman says Engage can gather more responses than a traditional telephone survey at a fraction of the cost. And his team was surprised to find people really open up to the computer in ways they might not to a human on sensitive topics.
Can you elaborate more on these two sides and tell me about any personal experiences, feelings, or emotions that have been particularly influential in shaping your opinion on abortion?
I personally have never been faced with getting an abortion. However, I believe that it is a woman's body, it's a woman's choice.
They were disclosing their experiences of having an abortion and being in that situation and the emotional toll. And at the end of the interview, we asked them, so, what was it like taking this interview? And they said it was really cathartic.
This week, Cloud Research released a presidential poll with Siena College. They found 60% of voters think Trump would be a strong leader, compared to 33% for Harris. But the AI then took it a step further and asked voters why. They discovered many voters didn't know Harris's background.
What you get out of it is you get to see what is it that the campaign needs to do in order to be able to change people's opinions, right? Not just what people's opinions are, but how can we change people's opinions? Because now we know why they think the way they do.
Cloud Research has been doing these AI surveys for about a year, making this the very first election cycle with AI pollsters. Littman says it's giving campaigns a new way to fine-tune their political messaging, and he, of course, thinks the role of AI in polling will only grow in the future, guys.
I mean, you answered my question. I was wondering if this is just in the beta testing phase, but Siena is a big-time polling
New York Times,
firm.
they are using this. It's out there. And what's fascinating, too, is it gives you a lot of control over how you do the survey. You can pre-script all the questions, or you can sort of have some important questions and then let the AI kind of run wild and ask all the follow-up questions it wants and see what the results are later.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, a lot of
Who
flexibility.
knew 10 years ago if we were talking about this, right? All right, Derek, thank you.
Okay, and so it's always, strange seeing myself on the screen. But so one of the things that we see from polling is that campaigns are ultimately interested in what they need to do in order to change people's opinions. And this is exactly what market research has in common with political campaigns, right? Because ultimately, in market research, you're trying to understand how to shape people's opinions toward different products, how to get them to be more interested in products. And in order to do that, we need to get a comprehensive picture of why people think and feel a certain way about those products when they do. And this is what conversational AI actually allows us to do. It allows us to interview people at scale to get this comprehensive picture. And now I want to turn to the other side of this research, which is the data analysis, right? So how do we take thousands of open-ended conversations and analyze them in a reasonable amount of time, right? And there are really three aspects to this. There's thematic coding, there's quantification, and there's validation. So the way that the process starts is that Engage reads every single one of the thousands of open-ended conversations, which are stored and transcribed on Engage. And in this particular slide, I'm showing a study that we conducted not too long ago. We presented it at TMRE a few weeks ago, where we interviewed about 3,500 people about their attitudes toward generational wealth. So what you're seeing here is one particular conversation or a particular survey. So I was saying that with Engage, there are really three three parts to the data analysis process. The first is just to review the videos, which is what you're seeing on the screen. The second part is to actually produce the themes, right? And so when it comes to building generational wealth, the system produces like full reports about what are the important themes that it found in terms of what's important to people about building generational wealth. So, for example, one of the themes is education, teaching children about finance. Now, the next step is to actually quantify those themes. So it's not important for us to just know that education is one of the themes that occurred, because maybe it occurred among one person, maybe it occurred among 50% of people or 90% of people. So what we're able to do here is we're able to quantify exactly the percentage of times that each theme occurred. We're able to do segmentation analysis. We're able to show that among boomers, for example, education was much more important than among people who are younger, right? And we're able to really explore the themes in a way that's it looks like it's a quantitative analysis, but it really is a thematic analysis at scale. So we're able to mix quant and qual together. The other part of the system also is that it has all of the methodologies that are important for market research embedded within the system. So it's not just a qualitative interviewing system. It also has the full functionalities of a quantitative system. And so this allows us to, like, for example, here, you could see we can randomly present different blocks, right? We could present them in different order. We could present them randomly and to do A/B testing. We can do max diff. We can do conjoint. We can have complex logic embedded within the study. And this is really where we think the research is going to be in the very near future. Whereas previously we thought of quantitative research and qualitative research as being separate, these kinds of systems allow us to really treat them as being the same. So it's no longer qual versus quant, it's qual integrated within quant, right? And that's what really gives these systems this kind of power. And finally, the last thing I want to mention is transparency, right? So we all know that LLMs hallucinate, and validity and reliability is the hallmark of research. And so when these reports are generated, they're always linked to the actual data, right? The raw data. And the raw data are really the conversations, right? So we can always click on any of the quotes, and the system will take us directly to where in the conversation those quotes were extracted from. Finally, before turning this over to Derek, I just want to mention one last thing, is that there are different ways to extract relevant information from qualitative research. I mean, so far I talked about themes, but another really exciting way to look at qualitative data is sentiment analysis. So in this analysis that I'm going to show you, we wanted to conduct a sentiment analysis on whether participants felt more fearful or more hopeful toward their financial future. And so what you could see is that we took 3,500 conversations and we put them on a scale from 1 to 10, and we can take, for example, this is a person all the way on one side of the scale. He says, "I'm terrified for my daughter. I would love for her to go to college, to get the job that she loves, but that doesn't seem to be possible. We're going to be, evicted from our apartment, so that's terrible, right?" So this person would be all the way on the left, right? You would get a 1 out of 10. Somebody who's very excited and hopeful about the future will get a 10 out of 10. And we're able to create this sentiment analysis distribution that clearly shows that currently people are more skewed toward the fear rather than the hope in terms of their financial future. But we're able to do that by extracting those sentiments from the conversations that they're having. And again, all of this is then possible to analyze within the kinds of like segmentation analysis that I was showing before. So those are some of the capabilities of the system. And now I turn it back to Derek to finally tell us about the exciting findings from his study. So take it away, Derek.
Thanks, Labe. I did give away some while you were fixing your computer. But this sentiment analysis is exactly what we did in the study I was talking about with the transcripts, right? So we asked people, or we asked the system rather, right, rank people from 1 to 5 in terms of pain of payment, right? And we define that in the range query or the sentiment analysis. And so that's how we got the data in order to make these comparisons. And so, as I mentioned before, we compared everything to everything, right? And it all correlates highly with each other across methods. What's also really exciting, right, when comparing the conversational AI to the open-ended text box, is that we got a little bit more than 2.5 times as much text from the conversational AI. So we have more data in terms of text versus the open-ended text box. And I think that makes sense, right? When open-ended text box happens, they write down the first thing that comes to mind, and then the participants move on to the next thing. But with conversational AI that is having coming back with a follow-up question that makes sense, right? People are more likely to write more. And what's really key, back to what Labe was talking about in terms of the why, Labe, if you could go back one slide. Sorry. If in terms of the why, right? We really have more confidence in what people are saying in the conversational AI because we ran what's called a linguistic inquiry and word count analysis, or LUC for short. And the results of that show greater causal reasoning, right? That's great. That's the why. And more clearer explanations of that why when in the conversational AI chatbot versus just the open-ended. And again, as I mentioned during the break, we had experience measures, and the overall experience of the survey was better as well. So if you could move ahead. Sorry, Labe. And so using that sentiment analysis tool that Labe mentioned, like I said, we asked the transcripts, right, to code participants on pain of payment. And we observed the same differences between cash and credit card, and also that inductive measure from that sentiment analysis, the not a scale measure, did correlate highly with the scale measure that they answered later, and in conditions where they didn't have a chatbot interaction. And so that shows how reliable it is. And then, as I mentioned too, we had a follow-up study where we validated that on a separate sample as well. And back to the question of, well, what other factors might be at play here, right? What might we have missed or not been able to think of ahead of time to ask as a survey question? We actually found quite a few things. And broadly speaking, I would just say these are the benefits of credit card use versus a cash, and there's a lot of different dimensions here. And I think what's important here is that with Engage, we really were able to see all of the dimensions, right, that people were thinking about in terms of the benefits of credit cards over cash. Whereas, maybe we could have come up with one or two of these on our own, but it wasn't the full understanding of that, that multidimensional construct, not to use too academic of a term. And what's also exciting about this is that in our statistical models, where we're actually seeing what does explain the differences in behavior that we see, these factors that we found with conversational AI explain more of the variance than the pain of payment measure that's been sort of the main explanation within the academic literature previously. So not only are we discovering new factors, new to the literature at least, but those factors have more explanatory power, right? And they also hang together well, as I said, like psychometrically, these themes or factors really hang together. And yeah, so kind of turning it, well, that's the main finding here. And as I mentioned, while Labe was away, we took all of these 6 items here, or turned them into survey items, ran another study, and it works just as well as scale measures once we found out what those actual factors were as well. And so again, like, we don't have to guess ahead of time anymore, like to come up with a suite of scale measures to put into a survey that may or may not actually come to fruition. And actually, one thing that early on we thought that, and we put this in from the beginning, that budgeting, right, like using a cash would allow people to budget better, or maybe credit card would allow people to budget better. And so that was something we thought ahead of time we should measure just because it made sense to us. Doesn't work at all. Didn't come out of the transcripts from the conversational AI. It's not a factor in these decisions. So we were wrong about that, right? Because we came up with that ahead of time, and it didn't come to fruition in the study. And to the second point of the full picture, right? We're really able to elicit all the different reasons that people might spend more with a credit card. And to Labe's point earlier, we did this very quickly, right? Like, to do this, I mean, what really held up the study was the RA coding, right, for validation, which took an enormous amount of time. But we're able to do this very quickly with Engage. And back to this idea of understanding the why, right? Well, now that we know what benefits of credit cards people think are important, right? And what they might, how they might influence, consumers' decisions, then, right, we can frame things along certain lines that resonate with those different factors. So we feel like this is a really great, especially in academic research, where we're trying to figure out why, like, what's the psychological process. This is really great early on, right? To kind of get a full idea of consumer decision processes. And, then it can be parlayed into longer, large scale studies, or even, help us make better frameworks for further investigation later, right? Or even monitoring. Labe, you have more to add to that?
Yeah, I think that is exactly the benefit of this. Is, as you said, it's great for explanatory research, and it's also great really for any type of study where the goal is to really understand the overall sentiment and overall attitude of people toward specific products. So we can stop here and take questions.
Awesome. I know we are going through some of these, but I know we are also going through pretty quick. So I'll kind of start at the bottom. Do you disclose to respondents what the conversational AI chatbot is AI?
The question is whether we disclose whether the conversation is taking place with AI.
Yes.
And the answer is yes, we always do, unless there's some kind of reason not to, which is almost never the case. And also, many of these, I know that in the CBS video, it was the conversations were taking place via voice, but also very often it's via text. And in that case, it's very clear that it's a chatbot. What we typically do is we give people a choice whether they want to talk to engage or whether they want to type. But yeah, in both cases, we make it very clear that it's a chatbot, and people usually don't mind.
Looks like we have two questions on whether or not this tool is multi-language or non-US English capabilities.
Yeah, so it is multi-language, and we've done studies in dozens of different languages, and it has capabilities for the vast majority of languages.
Let's see. In your study, was the conversational AI typing out its questions or was it speaking them?
All text-based for the cash versus credit card one.
How is Engage different from all other conversational AI tools? Any points of distinction we should know about?
Sure, I think I'll take that. So the biggest difference with Engage is that it has the full capabilities of a system that is a traditional quantitative survey system. So you can think of it as, whatever your favorite system is, let's say it's Qualtrics. That's what it is, right? It's a quantitative system that's capable of conducting all the complex methodologies, whether it's conjoint, whether it's max diff. It's able to randomize people to conditions. It's able to have complex logic. It's able to have complex quota management, right? And then within that quantitative methodology, you're able to insert qualitative follow-ups so as to really improve the quantitative study. So we don't necessarily think of Engage as a qualitative conversational system, and that's how it's different, right? We think of it as a system that merges both quantitative and qualitative approaches into one system and allows researchers to get the most of both the qualitative and the quantitative world. Currently, the vast majority of systems that I'm aware of that are qualitative conversational systems, if you want to do most of the research, most of the market research studies that you want to do will require multiple systems to be interacting. So you will conduct your quant with randomizing to conditions in one system like Qualtrics, and you do your qual in that other system, and then you sort of have to merge the data, and it's there's a lot of pain points there, and that's one of the ways in which Engage differs. And then I think the analytic capabilities are very powerful, and the conversation is actually very powerful as well.
How are you recruiting participants?
So we recruit participants in various ways. Cloud research, we have our own panel, and we also have panel partners. So if it's online, we can recruit people online, but through online panels. But we've also it's a link that can be shared in any modality. So we've done the polling research that we've done. We typically do text to web, so people get a text message on their phone, and people are randomly selected from let's say the general population to get a text, and then they click on that text, and it takes them to a online survey. So it's really multimodal. There's no limitations in terms of how data are shared.
Do you set up the AI with the outcomes and they guide the conversation themselves, or is there a way to interject?
So the way that Engage is set up is that there is a place to put your instructions, right, and give those instructions to the AI. So if most people who do research, most people who do qualitative research are familiar with an interview guide. You create an interview guide, right, and you give them those interview guides to your interviewers, and then those interviewers follow that guide in terms of structuring the conversation. So it's the same way in Engage. There's a place to put all of your instructions, and then you can simulate and view how Engage behaves and how it asks those questions, and how it sort of follows the instructions of the interview guide. And then you go back to the interview guide and go back and forth until you get it just right, and you feel very confident that what it's doing is what you would want to do as an interviewer. So that's the kind of flexibility that we built into the system.
Great. There's a couple questions on here on pricing. I believe normally you just provide a link for more details that someone can reach out to, unless you want to respond to those, but there's a couple of those on there.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get in touch with you. Get in touch with us, and we'll be more than happy to discuss it. I think we have different pricing depending on scale and things like that. But yeah, we're more than happy to talk to you about that.
How do you monitor that someone isn't going off the rails and getting upset or making up answers, not really actively participating?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So there's a lot that goes into the back end of the system that we are very, very, we put in a lot of effort into make sure that Engage steers the conversation back. And if we had a little bit more time, I could demonstrate it to you. But like, if you ask it a question like, okay, so what do you think about this product? And the person, says something crazy like, oh, I love choo-choo trains, or whatever. The system will be very gentle and it will guide that person and say, oh, it's very interesting, that you shared that you like trains, but tell me about the product now. Let's go back to the product, right? It'll always steer the conversation back until it realizes that the person is just not interested in engaging, and then it'll just move on to the next question, or it'll just terminate the conversation entirely. So it really is extremely well attuned to where the person is at, and it's really great at steering the conversation back to where it's supposed to be.
What happens if Engage encounters a bot as a respondent?
So we actually have bot detection within Engage. It's one of the great things. Again, I didn't have time to show you, but we have the ability to actually, first of all, we have an event streamer that's built into Engage. So you can view the entire session and you can see exactly the mouse movements and what the person is doing. So if there's, for example, a copy-paste event, it's immediately picked up. You can see that people are going off the screen and pasting something from ChatGPT into the session. We catch virtually everybody who does that. Engage is also, we have something called the engagement score, which catches people who are not engaged. That's what we're talking about for the last question, but also is able to detect, that engagement score is able to detect the likely responses that are made by LLMs. And so we have a variety of different ways to determine that a response is being made by a chatbot, both during the ongoing conversation, and certainly after the interview is over. You get an entire report, and then anybody who was providing the responses using chatbots, you can just remove them from the analysis.
Scrolling up in the chat. I just lost a question that there it is. Which studies should you avoid a tool like this for?
Which studies? That's a good question. I have to say that, um, okay, I would say that the way that we build this tool is so that it is really usable and scalable for any study. Because our motto at Cloud Research and at Engage is that every quantitative study can use a little bit of qual and sometimes a lot more. So fundamentally, Engage is a quantitative survey system. So again, you can create any study on it, even if it didn't have any qual at all. And so from that perspective, Engage is actually a good fit for literally any survey study. But in almost every case, we find that adding a little bit of qual just enhances the study. Like, just to give you a simple example, we did a study, a polling study a couple of weeks ago, leading up to the New York City election. And so imagine a simple poll that shows, okay, who do you plan to vote for? Mamdani, Cuomo, or Sliwa, right? That's a standard quantitative question. So let's say somebody selects Sliwa, right? Well, at that point, you introduce a little bit of quality and say, okay, so why do you want to vote for him, right? And then that gives you a little bit more of that why, that gives you more insight into what's actually going on. So really, Engage is a system for any study, and it just depends how much qual you want to add. Some studies are fully qualitative. You can have a 1 hour qualitative, interview with the participant on Engage. We've done that too. And some studies are 99% quant, but then you add a little bit of qual to give it a little bit more flavor, and that's a way to use it too. So there's really a wide range.
You're on mute, Jennifer.
That's probably helpful for me to come off of mute. Do you see, what are some of the enhancements and capabilities on the horizon do you see?
Derek, do you want to take that? Like, what are some things that you would want to see as in your academic?
Yeah, I mean, really far out. I could even see, having gone through this study, more like things that we traditionally would have done purely quant, being almost purely qual, right? Like, so a shift from standard survey items for everything to gradually over time, right, a more conversational AI based survey, right? We could do it at scale, and we can ask the same questions of the data that we would ask with scale items, right? But it might just be shorter, right, for the respondent, and more in depth than they would have been with just scale measures. So I can see a shift long term towards more qualitative within surveys.
As an academic researcher, can you talk about your level of confidence in AI's ability to properly code the responses?
That's a great question. And actually what I'll get to later on is how we validated the AI coding versus not only the scale responses, right? But we also took both the open-ended text responses and the AI chatbot transcripts, and we coded them manually by research assistants, right? And we also coded them with a separate LLM, and they all converge, right? So the results out of Engage converge with the scale responses, manual coding by trained RAs, and a different LLM. So that gives me a high degree of confidence in that. Then not to give away the story while we're waiting for Labe to get back on, but in a follow-up study, we took all of the new themes that we discovered with Engage, turned those into scale measures, and ran another a study with those scale measures, and uh, it works exactly the same as scale measures. And then we factor analyzed those, all the different measures, and the structure is the same across the conversational AI themes uh, and when they're operationalized as scale measures. So, all signs are pointing to yes in terms of it being a valid, psychometrically valid approach.
Again, I don't know if you see some of these questions in
Yeah,
there,
so
Derek. I don't want to ask them before answering, your some of them, but if you see anything that we can
yeah.
discuss.
For the cultural differences, we haven't, in the projects I'm involved in, we haven't got that far yet. But uh, I can say within the different approaches, whether it's the scale measures, the open-ended text box, or conversational AI with Engage, those all are working in a similar way within each condition. So no matter how you kind of compare across, it's working well. But the cultural differences, um, that's a more of a lab question. Oh, or Teresa.
Oh, sure. Yeah, there you go. Let's see what else I see in here. Uh,
Um, I get you also get the transcripts for Zinat's question.
incentives, do you have?
To incentivize, you use a paid panel like Cloud Research Connect. I think that, intrinsically, it's more incentivizing to have the conversation than it is to fill out, a bunch of bubbles or to just type something in a text box. And again, and that's, getting ahead of things, but in that same study, we also had experience measures, like the survey experience measures after uh, the AI chatbot and scale measures. And so we asked people, what was your experience in the survey in terms of like fatigue, et cetera. I forget the exact things, but essentially uh, the conversational AI was preferred to just an open-ended text box, and more or less along the lines, the same, in terms of like felt effort, uh, as just filling out scale responses.
Laura said this may be a lab question as well, but if the AI chat voice can be customized.
Yeah, maybe Teresa can. Yeah, she says, yeah. Um, Rick's question about Engage integrating with online text-based survey, that's native in Engage, so you can also ask other types of questions in Engage, not just the conversational part. So you can do it all in Engage, and you can also integrate it with Qualtrics as well.
All right. It looks like we have time for one more question since a lot of these are in the chat. I'm trying to make sure. Let's see. Have you ever done behavioral analysis on the results to uncover biases that might exist in the rationale explanation?
Derek?
Yeah, not in our the studies that I've been involved in, but I think that's. I mean, I understand the question in that are people just making up things, making up reasons to the AI chatbot, um, but it doesn't seem to be the case in terms of what we did because they're, across, hundreds of people, right? These same themes are coming to the fore. And when you look at the actual transcripts and like really dig into the data, you get a sense that, these are genuine um, responses and not like what I would call post hoc reconstruction, right? Like, after the fact, I'm making up a reason why I made the choice I did. I feel like that actually happens more or is more likely to happen with scale measures because you're giving them a reason in the text of the question itself, right? That might lead them to give a higher number than they would on that scale, versus where this is more open-ended and it's they're driving the reasons, right? If they can't come up with anything, then they just move on to the next question.
Great. Well, it looks like we're just about at time. I'm going to put Teresa's email or chat back in that has an email address. I'll also send Cloud Research the scripts from today in the chat and the Q&A, just in case we didn't answer some of your questions. In the meantime, I want to thank Labe, Derek, Cloud Research for today's presentation and our audience. It was a great presentation. And as mentioned, the recording will be sent out tomorrow. And if anyone needs anything, they can go to support@cloudresearch.com for any follow-up information. So thank you all, and I hope everyone enjoys the remainder of their day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.